This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 6. The Magic of a Yookoohoo. Woot had seen very little of magic during his wanderings, while the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman had seen a great deal of many sorts in their lives, yet all three were greatly impressed by Mrs. Yoop's powers. She did not affect any mysterious airs or indulge in chants or mystic rites, as most witches do, nor was the giantess old and ugly or disagreeable in face or manner. Nevertheless, she frightened her prisoners more than any witch could have done. "Please be seated," she said to them, as she sat herself down in a great armchair that spread her beautiful embroidered skirts for them to admire. But all the chairs in the room were so high that our friends could not climb to the seats of them. Mrs. Yoop observed this and waved her hand, when instantly a golden ladder appeared leaning against a chair opposite her own. "Climb up," said she, and they obeyed, the Tin Woodman and the boy assisting the more clumsy Scarecrow. When they were all seated in a row on the cushion of the chair, the giantess continued, "Now tell me how you happened to travel in this direction, and where you came from and what your errand is." So the Tin Woodman told her all about Nimmie Amee, and how he decided to find her and marry her, although he had no loving heart. The story seemed to amuse the big woman, who then began to ask the Scarecrow questions for the first time in her life heard of Ozma of Oz, and of Dorothy and Jack Pumpkinhead and Dr. Pipt and Tik-Tok and many other Oz people who were well known in the Emerald City. Also, Woot had to tell his story, which was very simple and did not take long. The giantess laughed heartily when the boy related their adventures at Loonville, but said she knew nothing of the Loons because she never left her valley. "There are wicked people who would like to capture me as they did my giant husband, Mr. Yoop," said she, "so I stay at home and mind my own business." "If Ozma knew that you dared to work magic without her consent, she would punish you severely," declared the Scarecrow. "For this castle is in the Land of Oz, and no persons in the Land of Oz are permitted to work magic except Glinda the Good and the little Wizard who lives with Ozma in the Emerald City." "That for your Ozma!" exclaimed the giantess, snapping her fingers in derision. "What do I care for a girl whom I have never seen and who has never seen me?" "But Ozma is a fairy," said the Tin Woodman, "and therefore she is very powerful. Also, we are under Ozma's protection, and to injure us in any way would make her extremely angry. What I do here in my own private castle in this secluded valley, where no one comes but fools like you, can never be known to your fairy Ozma," returned the giantess. "Do not seek to frighten me from my purpose, and do not allow yourselves to be frightened, for it is best to meet bravely what cannot be avoided. I am now going to bed, and in the morning I will give you all new forms, such as will be more interesting to me than the ones you now wear. Good night and pleasant dreams." Saying this, Mrs. Yoop rose from her chair and walked through a doorway into another room. So heavy was the tread of the giantess that even the walls of the big stone castle trembled as she stepped. She closed the door of her bedroom behind her, and then suddenly the light went out and the three prisoners found themselves in total darkness. The Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow didn't mind the dark at all, but Woot the Wanderer felt worried to be left in this strange place in this strange manner, without being able to see any danger that might threaten. "The big woman might have given me a bed, anyhow," he said to his companions, and scarcely had he spoken when he felt something press against his legs, which were then dangling from the seat of the chair. Leaning down, he put out his hand and found that a bedstead had appeared, with mattress, sheets and covers all complete. He lost no time in slipping down upon the bed and was soon fast asleep. During the night the Scarecrow and the Emperor talked in low tones together, and they got out of the chair and moved all about the room, feeling for some hidden spring that might open a door or window and permit them to escape. Morning found them still unsuccessful in the quest, and as soon as it was daylight Woot's bed suddenly disappeared, and he dropped to the floor with a thump that quickly wakened him. And after a time the Giantess came from her bedroom, wearing another dress that was quite as elaborate as the one in which she had been attired in the evening before, and also wearing the pretty lace apron. Having seated herself in a chair, she said, "I'm hungry, so I'll have breakfast at once." She clapped her hands together and instantly the table appeared before her, spread with snowy linen and laden with golden dishes. But there was no food upon the table, nor anything else except a pitcher of water, a bundle of weeds, and a handful of pebbles. But the Giantess poured some water into her coffee pot, patted it once or twice with her hand, and then poured out a cupful of steaming hot coffee. "Would you like some?" she asked Woot. He was suspicious of magic coffee, but it smelled so good that he could not resist it, so he answered, "If you please, madam." The Giantess poured out another cup and set it on the floor for Woot. It was as big as a tub, and the golden spoon in the saucer beside the cup was so heavy the boy could scarcely lift it. But Woot managed to get a sip of the coffee and found it delicious. Mrs. Yoop next transformed the weeds into a dish of oatmeal, which she ate with good appetite. "Now then," said she, picking up the pebbles, "I'm wondering whether I shall have fish balls or lamb chops to complete my meal. Which would you prefer, Woot the Wanderer?" "If you please, I'll eat the food in my knapsack," answered the boy. "Your magic food might taste good, but I'm afraid of it." The woman laughed at his fears and transformed the pebbles into fish balls. "I suppose you think that after you had eaten this food it would turn to stones again and make you sick," she remarked, "but that would be impossible. Nothing I transform ever gets back into its former shape again. So I have to be careful of my transformations," she added, busily eating while she talked. "For while I can change forms at will, I can never change them back again, which proves that even the powers of a clever Yookoohoo are limited. When I have transformed you three people, you must always wear the shapes that I have given you." "Then please don't transform us," begged Woot, "for we are quite satisfied to remain as we are." "I am not expecting to satisfy you, but intend to please myself," she declared, "and my pleasure is to give you new shapes. For, if by chance your friends came in search of you, not one of them would be able to recognize you." Her tone was so positive that they knew it would be useless to protest. The woman was not unpleasant to look at. Her face was not cruel. Her voice was big but gracious in tone, but her words showed that she possessed a merciless heart, and no pleadings would alter her wicked purpose. Mrs. Yoop took ample time to finish her breakfast, and the prisoners had no desire to hurry her, but finally the meal was concluded and she folded her napkin and made the table disappear by clapping her hands together. Then she turned to her captives and said, "The next thing on the program is to change your forms." "Have you decided what forms to give us?" asked the Scarecrow uneasily. "Yes, I dreamed it all out while I was asleep. This Tin Man seems a very solemn person." Indeed, the Tin Woodman was looking solemn. just then, for he was greatly disturbed. "So I shall change him into an owl." All she did was to point one finger at him as she spoke, but immediately the form of the Tin Woodman began to change, and in a few seconds Nick Chopper, the Emperor of the Winkies, had been transformed into an owl, with eyes as big as saucers and a hooked beak and strong claws. But he was still tin. He was a tin owl, with tin legs and beak and eyes of feathers. When he flew to the back of a chair and perched upon it, his tin feathers rattled against one another with a tinny clatter. The Giantess seemed much amused by the Tin Owl's appearance, for her laugh was big and jolly. "You're not liable to get lost," said she, "for your wings and feathers will make a racket wherever you go. And, on my word, a tin owl is so rare and pretty that it is an improvement on the ordinary bird. I did not intend to make you tin, but I forgot to wish you to be meat. However, tin you were and tin you are, and as it's too late to change you now, that settles it." Until now, the Scarecrow had rather doubted the possibility of Mrs. Yoop's being able to transform him or his friend the Tin Woodman, for they were not made as ordinary people are. He had worried more over what might happen to Woot than to himself, but now he began to worry about himself. "Madam," he said hastily, "I consider this action very impolite. It may even be called rude, considering we are your guests." "You are not my guests, for I did not invite you here," she replied. "Perhaps not, but we craved hospitality. We threw ourselves upon your mercy, so to speak, and we now find you have no mercy. Therefore, if you will excuse the expression, I must say it is downright wicked to take our proper forms away from us and give us others we do not care for." "Are you trying to make me angry?" she asked, frowning. "By no means," said the Scarecrow. "I'm just trying to make you act more ladylike." "Oh, indeed! In my opinion, Mr. Scarecrow, you are now acting like a bear. So a bear you shall be." Again the dreadful finger pointed, this time in the Scarecrow's direction, and at once his form began to change. In a few seconds he had become a small brown bear, but he was stuffed with straw as he had been before, and when the little brown bear shuffled across the floor, he was just as wobbly as the Scarecrow had been, and moved just as awkwardly. Woot was amazed, but he also was thoroughly frightened. "Did it hurt?" he asked the little brown bear. "No, of course not," growled the Scarecrow in the bear's form, "but I don't like walking on 4 legs. It's undignified." "Consider my humiliation," chirped the Tin Owl, trying to settle its tin feathers smoothly with its tin beak. "And I can't see very well either. The light seems to hurt my eyes." "That's because you are an owl," said Woot. "I think you will be able to see better in the dark." "Well," remarked the Giantess, "I am very pleased with these new forms, for my part, and I am sure you will like them better when you get used to them. So now," she added, turning to the boy, "it is your turn." "Don't you think you'd better leave me as I am?" asked Woot in a trembling voice. "No," she replied, "I'm going to make a monkey of you. I love monkeys, they're so cute, and I think a green monkey will be lots of fun and amuse me when I am sad." Woot shivered, for again this terrible magic finger pointed, and pointed directly his way. He felt himself changing, not so very much, however, and it didn't hurt him a bit. He looked down at his limbs and body, and found that his clothes were gone and his skin covered with a fine silk-like green fur. His hands and feet were now those of a monkey. He realized he really was a monkey, and the first feeling was one of anger. He began to chatter as monkeys do. He bounded to the seat of a giant chair, and then to its back, and with a wild leap sprang upon the laughing Giantess. His idea was to seize her chair and pull it out by the roots, and so have revenge on her wicked transformations. But she raised her hand and said, "Gently, my dear monkey, gently. You're not angry. You're happy as can be." Woot stopped short. No, he wasn't a bit angry now. He felt as good-humored and gay as ever when he was a boy. Instead of pulling Mrs. Yoop's hair, he perched on her shoulder and smoothed her soft cheek with his hairy paw. In return, she smiled at the funny green animal and patted his head. "Very good," said the Giantess. "Let us all become friends and happy together. How is my Tin Owl feeling?" "Quite comfortable," said the Owl. "I don't like it, to be sure, but I'm not going to allow my new form to make me unhappy. But tell me, please, what is a Tin Owl good for?" "You are only good to make me laugh," replied the Giantess. "Will a stuffed bear also make you laugh?" inquired the Scarecrow, sitting back on his haunches to look up at her. "Of course," declared the Giantess, "and I have added a little magic to your transformations to make you all contented with wearing your new forms. I'm sorry I didn't think to do that when I transformed Polychrome into a canary bird, but perhaps when she sees how cheerful you are, she will cease to be silent and sullen and take to singing. I will go get the bird and let you see her." With this, Mrs. Yoop went into the next room and soon returned, bearing a golden cage in which sat upon a swinging perch a lovely yellow canary. "Polychrome," said the Giantess, "permit me to introduce you to a green monkey which used to be a boy called Woot the Wanderer, and a tin owl which used to be a Tin Woodman named Nick Chopper, and a stuffed straw little brown bear which used to be a live scarecrow." "We already know one another," declared the Scarecrow. "The bird is Polychrome, the Rainbow's Daughter, and she and I used to be good friends." "Are you really my old friend, the Scarecrow?" asked the bird in a sweet, low voice. "There!" cried Mrs. Yoop. "That's the first time she had spoken since she was transformed." "I am really your old friend," answered the Scarecrow, "but you must pardon me for appearing just now in this brutal form." "I am a bird, as you are, dear Polly," said the Tin Woodman, "but alas, a tin owl is not as beautiful as a canary bird." "How dreadful it all is!" sighed the Canary. "Couldn't you manage to escape from this terrible Yookoohoo?" "No," answered the Scarecrow. "We tried to escape, but failed. She first made us her prisoners and then transformed us. But how did she manage to get you, Polychrome?" "I was asleep, and she took unfair advantage of me," answered the bird sadly. "Had I been awake, I could easily have protected myself." "Tell me," said the Green Monkey earnestly, as he came close to the cage, "what must we do, Daughter of the Rainbow, to escape from these transformations? Can't you help us, being a fairy?" "At present I am powerless to help even myself," replied the Canary. "That's the exact truth!" exclaimed the Giantess, who seemed pleased to hear the bird talk, even though it complained. "You are all helpless and in my power, so you may as well make up your minds to accept your fate and be content. Remember that you are transformed for good, since no magic on earth can break your enchantments. I am now going out for my morning walk, for each day after breakfast I walk 16 times around my castle for exercise. Amuse yourselves while I am gone, and when I return I hope to find you all reconciled and happy." So the Giantess walked to the door by which our friends had entered the great hall and spoke one word: "Open!" Then the door swung open, and after Mrs. Yoop had passed out, it closed again with a snap, and its powerful bolts shot into place. The Green Monkey had rushed towards the opening, hoping to escape, but he was too late and only got a bump on his nose as the door slammed shut.
End of Chapter 6.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 7. The Lace Apron. "Now," said the Canary in a tone more brisk than before, "we may talk together more freely, as Mrs. Yoop cannot hear us. Perhaps we can figure out a way to escape." "Open!" said Woot the Monkey, still facing the door, but his command had no effect and he slowly rejoined the others. "You cannot open any door or window in this enchanted castle unless you are wearing the Magic Apron," said the Canary. "What Magic Apron do you mean?" asked the Tin Owl in a curious voice. "The lace one which the Giantess always wears. I have been her prisoner in this cage for several weeks, and she hangs my cage in her bedroom every night so she can keep her eye on me," explained Polychrome the Canary. "Therefore I have discovered that it is the Magic Apron that opens the doors and windows, and nothing else can move them. When she goes to bed, Mrs. Yoop hangs her apron on the bedpost, and one morning she forgot to put it on when she commanded the door to open, and the door would not move. So then she put on the lace apron and the door obeyed her. That was how I learned the magic power of the apron." I see," said the little brown bear, wagging his stuffed head. "Then, if we could get the apron from Mrs. Yoop, we could open the doors and escape from our prison." "That is true, and it is the plan I was about to suggest," replied Polychrome the Canary Bird. "However, I don't believe the Owl could steal the apron, or even the Bear, but perhaps the Monkey could hide in her room at night and get the apron while she is asleep." "I'll try it," said Woot the Monkey. "I'll try it this very night if I can manage to steal into her bedroom." "You mustn't think about it, though," warned the bird, "for she can read your thoughts whenever she cares to do so. Do not forget, before you escape, to take me with you. Once I am out of the power of the Giantess, I may discover a way to save us all." "We won't forget our fairy friend," promised the boy, "but perhaps you can tell me how to get into the bedroom." "No," declared Polychrome, "I cannot advise you as to do that. You must watch for a chance, and slip in when Mrs. Yoop isn't looking." They talked it over for a while, and then Mrs. Yoop returned. When she entered, the door opened suddenly at her command, and closed as soon as her huge form had passed through the doorway. During that day she entered her bedroom several times, on one errand or another, and always she commanded the door to close behind her, and her prisoners found not the slightest chance to leave the big hall in which they were confined. The Green Monkey thought it would be wise to make a friend of the big woman, so as to gain her confidence, so he sat on the back of her chair and chattered to her while she mended her stockings and sewed silver buttons on some golden shoes that were as big as rowboats. This pleased the Giantess, and she would pause at times to pat the Monkey's head. The little brown bear curled up in a corner and lay still all day. The Owl and the Canary found that they could converse together in the bird language, which neither the Giantess nor the Bear nor the Monkey could understand, so at times they twittered away to each other and passed the long, dreary day quite cheerfully. After dinner, Mrs. Yoop took a big fiddle from a cupboard and played such loud and dreadful music that her prisoners were all thankful when at last she stopped and said she was going to bed. After cautioning the Monkey and Bear and Owl to behave themselves during the night, she picked up the cage containing the Canary and, going to the door of her bedroom, commanded it open. Just then, however, she remembered she had left her fiddle lying upon a table, so she went back for it and put it away in the cupboard, and while her back was turned the Green Monkey slipped through the open door into her bedroom and hid underneath the bed. The Giantess, being sleepy, did not notice this, and entering her room she made the door close behind her, and then hung the bird cage on a peg by the window. Then she began to undress, first by taking off the lace apron and laying it over the bedpost, where it was within easy reach of her hand. As soon as Mrs. Yoop was in bed the lights all went out, and Woot the Monkey crouched under the bed and waited patiently until he heard the Giantess snoring. Then he crept out, and in the dark felt around until he got hold of the apron, which he at once tied around his own waist. Next Woot tried to find the Canary, and there was just enough moonlight showing through the window to enable him to see where the cage hung, but it was out of his reach. At first he was tempted to leave Polychrome and escape with his other friends, but, remembering his promise to the Rainbow's Daughter, Woot tried to think how to save her. A chair stood near the window, and this, showing dimly in the moonlight, gave him an idea. By pushing against it with all his might, he found that he could move the giant chair a few inches at a time. So he pushed and pushed until the chair was beneath the bird cage, and then he sprang noiselessly upon the seat, for his monkey form enabled him to jump higher than he could do as a boy, and from there to the back of the chair, and so managed to reach the cage and take it off the peg. Then down he sprang to the floor and made his way to the door. "Open!" he commanded, and at once the door obeyed and swung open. But his voice awakened Mrs. Yoop, who gave a wild cry and sprang out of bed with one bound. The Green Monkey dashed through the doorway, carrying the cage with him, and before the Giantess could reach the door it slammed shut and imprisoned her in her own bedchamber. The noise she made, pounding upon the door, and her yells of anger and dreadful threats of vengeance filled all our friends with terror, and Woot the Monkey was so excited that in the dark he could not find the outer door of the hall. But the Tin Owl could see very nicely in the dark, so he guided his friends to the right place, and when all were grouped before the door, Woot commanded it to open. The magic apron proved as powerful as when it had been worn by the Giantess, so a moment later they had rushed through the passage and were standing in the fresh night air outside the castle, free to go wherever they willed.
End of Chapter 7.
Recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 8. The Menace of the Forest. "Quick!" cried Polychrome the Canary. "We must hurry, or Mrs. Yoop may find some way to recapture us, even now. Let us get out of her valley as soon as possible." So they set off toward the east, moving as swiftly as they could, and for a long time they could hear the yells and struggles of the imprisoned Giantess. The Green Monkey could run over the ground very swiftly, and he carried with him the bird cage containing Polychrome the Rainbow's Daughter. Also, the Tin Owl could skip and fly along at a good rate of speed, his feathers rattling against one another with a tinkling sound as he moved. But the little brown bear, being stuffed with straw, was a clumsy traveler, and the others had to wait for him to follow. However, they were not long in reaching the ridge that led out of Mrs. Yoop's valley, and when they had passed this ridge and descended into the next valley, they stopped to rest, for the Green Monkey was tired. "I believe we are safe now," said Polychrome, when her cage was set down and the others had all gathered around it. "For Mrs. Yoop dares not go outside of her own valley for fear of being captured by her enemies, so we may take our time to consider what to do next." "I'm afraid poor Mrs. Yoop will starve to death if no one lets her out of "Her bedroom," said Woot, who had a heart as kind as that of the Tin Woodman. "We've taken her Magic Apron away, and now the doors will never open." "Don't worry about that," advised Polychrome. "Mrs. Yoop has plenty of magic left to console her." "Are you sure of that?" asked the Green Monkey. "Yes, for I've been watching her for weeks," said the Canary. "She has 6 magic hairpins which she wears in her hair, and a magic ring which she wears on her thumb and which is invisible to all eyes except those of a fairy, and magic bracelets on her ankles. So I am positive that she will manage to find a way out of her prison." "She might transform the door into an archway," suggested the little Brown Bear. "That would be easy for her," said the Tin Owl, "but I'm glad she was too angry to think of that before we got out of her valley." "Well, we have escaped the big woman, to be sure," remarked the Green Monkey, "but we still wear the awful forms the cruel Yookoohoo gave us. How are we going to get rid of these shapes and become ourselves again?" None could answer that question. They sat around the cage, brooding over the problem until the monkey fell asleep. Seeing this, the Canary tucked her head under her wing and also slept, and the Tin Owl and the Brown Bear did not disturb them until morning came and it was broad daylight. "I'm hungry," said Woot when he awakened, for his knapsack of food had been left behind at the castle. "Then let us travel on until we can find something for you to eat," returned the Scarecrow Bear. "There's no use in your lugging my cage any farther," declared the Canary. "Let me out and throw the cage away. Then I can fly with you and find my own breakfast of seeds. Also, I can search for water and tell you where to find it." So the Green Monkey unfastened the door of the golden cage and the Canary hopped out. At first she flew high in the air and made great circles overhead, but after a time she returned and perched beside them. "At the east, in the direction we were following," announced the Canary, "there is a fine forest, with a brook running through it. In the forest there may be fruits or nuts growing, or berry bushes at its edge, so let us go that way." They agreed to this and promptly set off, this time moving more deliberately. The Tin Owl, which had guided their way during the night, now found the sunshine very trying to his big eyes, so he shut them tight and perched upon the back of the little Brown Bear, which carried the Owl's weight with ease. The Canary sometimes perched upon the Green Monkey's shoulder and sometimes fluttered on ahead of the party, and in this manner they traveled in good spirits across the valley and into the next one to the east of it. This they found to be an immense hollow shaped like a saucer, and on its farther edge appeared the forest which Polychrome had seen from the sky. "Come to think of it," said the Tin Owl, waking up and blinking comically at his friends, "there's no object now in our traveling to the Munchkin country. My idea in going there was to marry Nimmie Amee, but however much the Munchkin girl may have loved a Tin Woodman, I cannot reasonably expect her to marry a Tin Owl." "There is some truth in that, my friend," remarked the Brown Bear, "and to think that I, who was considered the handsomest scarecrow in the world, am now condemned to be a scrubby, no-account beast, whose only redeeming feature is that he is stuffed with straw." "Consider my case, please," said Woot. "The cruel Giantess has made a monkey of a boy, and that is the most dreadful deed of all." "Your color is rather pretty," said the Brown Bear, eyeing Woot critically. "I have never seen a pea-green monkey before, and it strikes me you are quite gorgeous." "It isn't so bad to be a bird," asserted the Canary, fluttering from one to another with a free and graceful motion, "but I long to enjoy my own shape again." As Polychrome, you are the loveliest maiden I have ever seen, except, of course, Ozma," said the Tin Owl. "So the Giantess did well to transform you into the loveliest of all birds, if you were to be transformed at all. But tell me, since you are a fairy, and have a fairy wisdom, do you think we shall be able to break these enchantments?" "Queer things happen in the Land of Oz," replied the Canary, again perching on the Green Monkey's shoulder and turning one bright eye thoughtfully toward her questioner. "Mrs. Yoop has declared that none of her transformations can ever be changed, even by herself. But I believe that if we could get to Glinda the Good Sorceress, she might find a way to restore us to our natural shapes. Glinda, as you know, is the most powerful sorceress in the world, and there are few things she cannot do if she tries." "In that case," said the little Brown Bear, "let us return southward and try to get to Glinda's castle. It lies in the Quadling Country, you know, so it is a good way from here." "First, however, let us visit the forest and search for something to eat," pleaded Woot. So they continued on to the edge of the forest, which consisted of many tall and beautiful trees. They discovered no fruit trees at first, so the Green Monkey pushed on into the forest depths and the others followed close behind him. They were traveling quietly along under the shade of the trees when suddenly an enormous jaguar leaped upon them from a limb, and with one blow of his paws sent the little Brown Bear tumbling over and over until he was stopped by a tree trunk. Instantly they all took alarm. The Tin Owl shrieked, "Hoot! Hoot!" and flew straight up to a branch of a tall tree. Although he could scarcely see where he was going, the Canary swiftly darted to a place beside the Owl, and the Green Monkey sprang up, caught a limb, and soon scrambled to a high perch of safety. The Jaguar crouched low and with hungry eyes regarded the little Brown Bear, which slowly got upon its feet and asked reproachfully, "For goodness sake, beast, what were you trying to do?" "Trying to get my breakfast," answered the Jaguar with a snarl, "and I believe I succeeded. You ought to make a delicious meal, unless you happen to be old and tough." "I'm worse than that, considered as a breakfast," said the Bear, "for I'm only a skin stuffed with straw, and therefore not fit to eat." "Indeed!" cried the Jaguar in a disappointed voice. "Then you must be a magic bear or enchanted, and I must seek my breakfast from among your companions." With this he raised his lean head to look up at the Tin Owl and the Canary and the Monkey, and he lashed his tail upon the ground and growled as fiercely as any jaguar could. "My friends are enchanted also," said the little Brown Bear. "All of them?" asked the Jaguar. "Yes, the Owl is tin, so you couldn't possibly eat him. The Canary is a fairy, Polychrome, the Daughter of the Rainbow, and you could never catch her because she can easily fly out of your reach." "There still remains the Green Monkey," remarked the Jaguar hungrily. "He is neither made of tin nor stuffed with straw, nor can he fly. I'm pretty good at climbing trees myself, so I think I'll capture the monkey and eat him for my breakfast." Woot the Monkey, hearing this speech from his perch on the tree, became much frightened, for he knew the nature of jaguars and realized they could climb trees and leap from limb to limb with the agility of cats. So he at once began to scamper through the forest as fast as he could go, catching at a branch with his long monkey arms and swinging his green body through space to grasp another branch in a neighboring tree, and so on while the Jaguar followed him from below, his eyes fixed steadfastly on his prey. But presently Woot got his feet tangled in the lace apron which he was still wearing, and that tripped him in his flight and made him fall to the ground, where the Jaguar placed one huge paw upon him and said grimly, "I've got you now." The fact that the apron had tripped him made Woot remember its magic powers, and in his terror he cried out, "Open!" without stopping to consider how this command might save him. But at the word the earth opened at the exact spot where he lay under the jaguar's paw, and his body sank downward, the earth closing over it again. The last thing Woot the Monkey saw as he glanced upward was the jaguar peering into the hole in astonishment. "He's gone!" cried the beast, with a long-drawn sigh of disappointment. "He's gone, and now I shall have no breakfast." The clatter of the Tin Owl's wings sounded above him, and the little Brown Bear came trotting up and asked, "Where is the monkey? Have you eaten him so quickly?" "No, indeed," answered the jaguar. "He disappeared into the earth before I could take one bite of him." And now the Canary perched upon a stump, a little way from the forest beast, and said, "I am glad our friend has escaped you, but as it is natural for a hungry beast to wish his breakfast, I will try to give you one." "Thank you," replied the jaguar. "You're rather small for a full meal, but it's kind of you to sacrifice yourself to my appetite." "Oh, I don't intend to be eaten, I assure you," said the Canary. "But as I am a fairy, I know something of magic, and though I am now transformed into a bird's shape, I am sure I can conjure up a breakfast that will satisfy you." "If you can work magic, why don't you break the enchantment you are under and return to your proper form?" inquired the beast doubtingly. "I haven't the power to do that," answered the Canary, "for Mrs. Yoop, the giantess who transformed me, used a peculiar form of yookoohoo magic that is unknown to me. However, she could not deprive me of my own fairy knowledge, so I will try to get you a breakfast." "Do you think a magic breakfast would taste good, or relieve the pangs of hunger I now suffer?" asked the jaguar. "I am sure it would. What would you like to eat?" "Give me a couple of fat rabbits," said the beast. "Rabbits? No, indeed. I'd not allow you to eat the dear little things," declared Polychrome the Canary. "Well, 3 or 4 squirrels, then," pleaded the jaguar. "Do you think me so cruel?" demanded the Canary indignantly. "The squirrels are my especial friends." "How about a plump owl?" asked the beast. "Not a tin one, you know, but a real meat owl." "Neither beast nor bird shall you have," said Polychrome in a positive voice. "Give me a fish, then. There's a river a little way off," proposed the jaguar. "No living thing shall be sacrificed to feed you," returned the Canary. "Then what in the world do you expect me to eat?" said the jaguar in a scornful tone. "How would mush and milk do?" asked the Canary. The jaguar snarled in derision and lashed his tail against the ground angrily. "Give him some scrambled eggs on toast, Polly," suggested the Bear Scarecrow. "He ought to like that." "I will," responded the Canary, and fluttering her wings, she made a flight of 3 circles around the stump. Then she flew up to a tree, and the Bear and the Owl and the Jaguar saw that upon the stump had appeared a great green leaf, upon which was a large portion of scrambled eggs on toast, smoking hot. "There," said the Bear, "eat your breakfast, friend Jaguar, and be content." The Jaguar crept closer to the stump and sniffed the fragrance of the scrambled eggs. They smelled so good that he tasted them, and they tasted so good that he ate the strange meal in a hurry, proving he had been really hungry. "I prefer rabbits," he muttered, licking his chops, "but I must admit the magic breakfast has filled my stomach full and brought me comfort. So I'm much obliged for the kindness, little Fairy, and I'll now leave you in peace." Saying this, he plunged into the thick underbrush and soon disappeared, although they could hear his great body crashing through the bushes until he was far distant. "That was a good way to get rid of the savage beast, Polly," said the Tin Woodman to the Canary, "but I'm surprised that you didn't give our friend Woot a magic breakfast when you knew he was hungry." "The reason for that," answered Polychrome, "was that my mind was so intent on other things that I quite forgot my power to produce food by magic. But where is the Monkey Boy?" "Gone," said the Scarecrow Bear solemnly. "The earth has swallowed him up."
End of Chapter 8.
Recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 9. The Quarrelsome Dragons. The Green Monkey sank gently into the earth for a little way, then tumbled swiftly through space, landing on a rocky floor with a thump that astonished him. Then he sat up, found that no bones were broken, and gazed around him. He seemed to be in a big underground cave, which was dimly lighted by dozens of big round discs that looked like moons. They were not moons, however, as Woot discovered when he examined the place more carefully. They were eyes. The eyes were in the heads of enormous beasts whose bodies trailed far behind them. Each beast was bigger than an elephant and 3 times as long, and there were a dozen or more of the creatures scattered here and there about the cavern. On their bodies were big scales as round as pie plates, which were beautifully tinted in shades of green, purple and orange. On the ends of their long tails were clusters of jewels. Around the great moon-like eyes were circles of diamonds which sparkled in the subdued light that glowed from the eyes. Woot saw that the creatures had wide mouths and rows of terrible teeth, and from tales he had heard of such beings, he knew that he had fallen into a cavern inhabited by the great dragons that had been driven from the surface of the earth and were only allowed to come out once in 100 years to search for food. Of course, he had never seen dragons before, yet there was no mistaking them, for they were unlike any other living creature. Woot sat upon the floor where he had fallen, staring around, and the owners of the big eyes returned his look, silently and motionless. Finally, one of the dragons, which was the farthest away from him, asked in a deep, grave voice, "What was that?" And the greatest dragon of all, who was just in front of the Green Monkey, answered in a still deeper voice, "It is some foolish animal from outside." "Is it good to eat?" inquired a smaller dragon beside the great one. "I'm hungry." "Hungry!" exclaimed all the dragons in a reproachful chorus. And then the great one said chillingly, "Tut, tut, my son. You've got no reason to be hungry at this time." "Why not?" asked the little dragon. "I haven't eaten in 11 years." "11 years is nothing," remarked another dragon, sleepily opening and closing his eyes. "I haven't feasted for over 87 years, and I dare not get hungry for a dozen or so years to come. Children who eat between meals should be broken of the habit." "All I had 11 years ago was a rhinoceros, and that's not a full meal at all," grumbled the young one. "And before that I had waited 62 years to be fed, so it's no wonder I'm hungry." "How old are you?" asked Woot, forgetting his own dangerous position in his interest in the conversation. "Why, I'm How old am I, Father?" asked the little dragon. "Goodness gracious, what a child to ask questions! Do you want me to keep thinking all the time? Don't you know that thinking is very bad for dragons?" returned the big one impatiently. "How old am I, Father?" persisted the small dragon. "About 630, I believe. Ask your mother." "No, don't," said an old dragon in the background. "Haven't I enough worries, what with being wakened in the middle of a nap, without being obliged to keep track of my children's ages?" "You've been fast asleep for over 60 years, Mother," said the child dragon. "How long a nap do you wish?" "I should have slept 40 years longer, and this strange little green beast should be punished for falling into our cavern and disturbing us." "I didn't know you were here, and I didn't know I was going to fall in," explained Woot. "Nevertheless, here you are," said the great dragon, "and you have carelessly wakened our entire tribe, so it stands to reason you must be punished." "In what way?" inquired the Green Monkey, trembling a little. "Give me time and I'll think of a way. You're in no hurry, are you?" asked the great dragon. "No, indeed," cried Woot. "Take your time. I'd much rather you'd all go to sleep again and punish me when you wake up in 100 years or so." "Let me eat him," pleaded the littlest dragon. "He is too small," said the father. "To eat this one green monkey would only serve to make you hungry for more, and there are no more." "Quit this chatter and let me get to sleep," protested another dragon, yawning in a fearful manner, for when he opened his mouth a sheet of flame leaped forth from it and made Woot jump back to get out of its way. In his jump he bumped against the nose of a dragon behind him, which opened its mouth to growl and shot another sheet of flame at him. The flame was bright, but not very hot, yet Woot screamed with terror and sprang forward with a great bound. This time he landed on the paw of the great Chief Dragon, who angrily raised his other paw and struck the Green Monkey with a fierce blow. Woot went sailing through the air and fell sprawling upon the rocky floor far beyond the place where the dragon tribe was grouped. All the great beasts were now thoroughly wakened and aroused, and they blamed the monkey for disturbing their quiet. The littlest dragon darted after Woot, and the others turned their unwieldy bodies in his direction and followed, flashing from their eyes and mouths flames which lighted up the entire cavern. Woot almost gave himself up for lost at that moment, but he scrambled to his feet and dashed away to the farthest end of the cave, the dragons following more leisurely because they were too clumsy to move fast. Perhaps they thought there was no need of haste, as the monkey could not escape from the cave. But away up at the end of the place, the cavern floor was heaped with tumbled rocks, so Woot, with an agility born of fear, climbed from rock to rock until he found himself crouched against the cavern roof. There he waited, for he could go no farther, while over the tumbled rocks slowly crept the dragons, the littlest one coming first because he was hungry as well as angry. The beasts had almost reached him when Woot, remembering his lace apron, now sadly torn and soiled, recovered his wits and shouted, "Open!" At the cry, a hole appeared in the roof of the cavern, just over his head, and through it the sunlight streamed in full upon the Green Monkey. The dragons paused, astonished at the magic and blinking at the sunlight, and this gave Woot time to climb through the opening. As soon as he reached the surface of the earth, the hole closed again, and the boy monkey realized with a thrill of joy that he had seen the last of the dangerous dragon family. He sat upon the ground, still panting hard from his exertions, when the bushes before him parted and his former enemy, the jaguar, appeared. "Don't run," said the woodland beast, as Woot sprang up. "You are perfectly safe so far as I am concerned, for since you are so mysteriously disappeared, I have had my breakfast. I am now on my way home to sleep the rest of the day." "Oh, indeed," returned the Green Monkey in a tone both sorry and startled. "Which one of my friends did you manage to eat?" "None of them," returned the Jaguar with a sly grin. "Had a dish of magic scrambled eggs, on toast. And it wasn't a bad feast at all. There isn't room in me for even you, and I don't regret it, because I judge from your green color that you are not ripe, and would make an indifferent meal. We Jaguars have to be careful of our digestions. Farewell, friend Monkey. Follow the path I made through the bushes, and you will find your friends." With this the Jaguar marched on his way, and Woot took his advice and followed the trail he had made until he came to the place where the little Brown Bear and the Tin Owl and the Canary were conferring together and wondering what had become of their comrade, the Green Monkey.
End of chapter 9.
Vox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 10. Tommy Quickstep. "Our best plan," said the Scarecrow Bear, when the Green Monkey had related the story of his adventure with the dragons, "is to get out of this Gillikin country as soon as we can and try to find our way to the castle of Glinda, the Good Sorceress. There are too many dangers lurking here to suit me, and Glinda may be able to restore us to our proper forms." "If we turned south now," the Tin Owl replied, "we might go straight into the Emerald City. That's a place I wish to avoid, for I'd hate to have my friends see me in this sad plight," and he blinked his eyes and fluttered his tin wings mournfully. "But I am certain we have passed beyond the Emerald City," the Canary assured him, sailing lightly around their heads. "So, should we turn south from here, we would pass into the Munchkin country. Continuing south, we would reach the Quadling country, where Glinda's castle is located." "Well, since you're sure of that, let's start right away," proposed the Bear. "It's a long journey at the best, but I'm getting tired of walking on 4 legs." "I thought you never tired being stuffed with straw," said Woot. "I mean that it annoys me to be obliged to go on at all fours when 2 legs are my proper walking equipment," replied the Scarecrow. "I consider it beneath my dignity. In other words, my remarkable brains can tire through humiliation, although my body cannot tire." "That is one of the penalties of having brains," remarked the Tin Owl with a sigh. "I have had no brains since I was a man of meat, and so I never worry. Nevertheless, I prefer my former manly form to this owl's shape, and would be glad to break Mrs. Yoop's enchantment as soon as possible. I am so noisy just now that I disturb myself," and he fluttered his wings with a clatter that echoed through the forest. So, being all of one mind, they turned southward, traveling steadily on until the woods were left behind and the landscape turned from purple tints to blue tints, which assured them they had entered the country of the Munchkins. "Now I feel myself more safe," said the Scarecrow Bear. "I know this country pretty well, having been made here by a Munchkin farmer and having wandered over these lovely blue lands many times. Seems to me, indeed, that I even remember that group of tall trees ahead of us, and if I do, we are not far from the home of my friend Ginger." "Who is Ginger?" asked Woot the Green Monkey. "Haven't you heard of Ginger?" exclaimed the Scarecrow in surprise. "No," said Woot. "Is Ginger a man, a woman, a beast or a bird?" "Ginger is a girl," explained the Scarecrow Bear. "She's a fine girl, too, although a bit restless and liable to get excited. Once, a long time ago, she raised an army of girls and called herself General Ginger. With her army she captured the Emerald City and drove me out of it, because I insisted that an army in Oz was highly improper. But Ozma punished the rash girl, and afterwards Ginger and I became fast friends. Now Ginger lives peacefully on a farm near here, and raises fields of cream puffs, chocolate caramels, and macaroons. They say she's a pretty good farmer, and in addition to that she's an artist and paints pictures so perfect that one can scarcely tell them from nature. She often repaints my face for me when it gets worn or mussy, and the lovely expression I wore when the Giantess transformed me was painted by Ginger only a month or so ago." "It was certainly a pleasant expression," agreed Woot. "Ginger can paint anything," continued the Scarecrow Bear, with enthusiasm, as they walked along together. "Once, when I came to her house, my straw was old and crumpled, so that my body sagged dreadfully. I needed new straw to replace the old, but Ginger had no straw on all her ranch, and I was really unable to travel further until I'd been restuffed. When I explained this to Ginger, the girl at once painted a straw stack which was so natural that I went to it and secured enough straw to fill all my body. It was a good quality of straw, too, and lasted me a long time." This seemed very wonderful to Woot, who knew that such a thing could never happen in any place but a fairy country like Oz. The Munchkin country was much nicer than the Gillikin country, and all the fields were separated by blue fences with grassy lanes and paths of blue ground, and the land seemed very well cultivated. They were on a little hill looking down upon this favored country, but had not quite reached the settled parts when, on turning a bend in the path, they were halted by a form that barred their way. A more curious creature they had seldom seen, even in the Land of Oz, where curious creatures abound. Had the head of a young man, evidently a Munchkin, with a pleasant face and hair neatly combed, but the body was very long, for it had 20 legs, 10 legs on each side, and this caused the body to stretch out and lie in a horizontal position so that all the legs could touch the ground and stand firm. From the shoulders extended 2 small arms, at least they seemed small beside so many legs. This odd creature was dressed in the regulation clothing of the Munchkin people, a dark blue coat neatly fitting on the long body, and each pair of legs having a pair of sky blue trousers, with each blue-tinted stockings and blue leather shoes turned up at the pointed toes. "I wonder who you are," said Polychrome the Canary, fluttering above the strange creature, who had probably been asleep on the path. "I sometimes wonder myself who I am," replied the many-legged young man, "but in reality I am Tommy Kwikstep, and I live in a hollow tree that fell to the ground with age. I have polished the inside of it and made a door at each end, and that's a very comfortable residence for me, because it just fits my shape." "How did you happen to have such a shape?" asked the Scarecrow Bear, sitting on his haunches and regarding Tommy Kwikstep with a serious look. "Is the shape natural?" "No, it was wished on me," replied Tommy with a sigh. "I used to be very active and loved to run errands for anyone who needed my services. That was how I got the name of Tommy Kwikstep. I could run an errand more quickly than any other boy, and so I was very proud of myself. One day, however, I met an old lady who was a fairy, or a witch, or something of the sort, and she said if I would run an errand for her, to carry some magic medicine to another old woman, she would grant me just one wish, whatever the wish happened to be." Of course I consented, and taking the medicine, I hurried away. It was a long distance, mostly uphill, and my legs began to grow weary. Without thinking what I was doing, I said aloud, "Dear me, I wish I had 20 legs!" And in an instant I became the unusual creature you see beside you. 20 legs, 20 on one man! You may count them if you doubt my word. "You've got 'em all right," said Woot the Monkey, who had already counted them. After I had delivered the magic medicine to the old woman, I returned and tried to find the witch or fairy or whatever she was, who had given me the unlucky wish, so she could take it away again. I've been searching for her ever since, but never can I find her," continued poor Tommy Kwikstep sadly. "I suppose," said the Tin Owl, blinking at him, "you can travel very fast with those 20 legs." "At first I was able to," was the reply, "but I traveled so much, searching for the fairy or witch or whatever she was, that I soon got corns on my toes. Now a corn on one toe is not so bad, but when you have 100 toes, as I have, and get corns on most of them, it is far from pleasant. Instead of running, I now painfully crawl, and although I try not to be discouraged, I do hope I shall find that witch or fairy or whatever she was before long." "I hope so, too," said the Scarecrow. "But after all, you have the pleasure of knowing you are unusual, and therefore remarkable among the people of Oz. To be just like other persons is small credit to one, while to be unlike others is a mark of distinction." "That sounds very pretty," returned Tommy Kwikstep, "but if you had to put on 10 pair of trousers every morning and tie up 20 shoes, you would prefer not to be so distinguished." "Was the witch or the fairy, or whatever she was, an old person, with wrinkled skin and half her teeth gone?" inquired the Tin Owl. "No," said Tommy Kwikstep. "Then it wasn't old Mombi," remarked the transformed Emperor. "I'm not interested in who it was, so much as I am in who it was," said the 20-legged man. "And whomever she was, she had managed to keep out of my way." "If you found her, do you suppose she'd change you back into a 2-legged boy?" asked Woot. "Perhaps so, if I could run another errand for her and so earn another wish." "Would you really like to be as you were before?" asked Polychrome the Canary, perching upon the Green Monkey's shoulder to observe Tommy Kwikstep more attentively. "I would, indeed," was the earnest reply. "Then I will see what I can do for you," promised the Rainbow's Daughter, and flying to the ground she took a small twig in her bill and with it made several mystic figures on each side of Tommy Kwikstep. "Are you a witch or fairy or something of the sort?" he asked as he watched her wonderingly. The Canary made no answer, for she was busy, but the Scarecrow Bear replied, "Yes, she's something of the sort, and a bird of a magician." The 20-legged boy's transformation happened so queerly that they were all surprised at its method. First, Tommy Kwikstep's last 2 legs disappeared, then the next 2, and the next, and as each pair of legs vanished, his body shortened. All this while Polychrome was running around him and chirping mystical words, and when all the young man's legs had disappeared but 2, he noticed that the Canary was still busy and cried out in alarm, "Stop! Stop! Leave me 2 of my legs, or I shall be worse off than before." "I know," said the Canary. "I'm only removing with my magic the corns from your last 10 toes." "Thank you for being so thoughtful," he said gratefully, and now they noticed that Tommy Kwikstep was quite a nice-looking young fellow. "What will you do now?" asked Woot the Monkey. "First," he answered, "I must deliver a note which I've carried in my pocket ever since the witch, or fairy, or whatever she was, granted my foolish wish. and I am resolved never to speak again without taking time to think carefully on what I am going to say, for I realize that speech without thought is dangerous, and after I've delivered the note I shall run errands again for anyone who needs my services." So he thanked Polychrome again and started away in a different direction from their own, and that was the last they saw of Tommy Kwikstep.
End of chapter 10.